Oklahoma is the land of second, third, and last chances. Who were the people that made it so? We'll trace the golden threads they've woven throughout Oklahoma history. The Red River Institute and Atwoods present Oklahoma Gold. I'm Gwin Faulconer-Lippert, along with author and award-winning Southern Nazarene University historian John J. Dwyer. We'll dig for the golden nuggets of Oklahoma history, here now on Oklahoma Gold. The high school game of the century. John J. Dwyer, what is this story?
Gwin, we've talked before about how Dr. Bob Blackburn, the just retired executive director of the Oklahoma Historical Society, had several reasons for wanting me to author a new history of Oklahoma way back in 2005 when he first approached me with the idea. One was his desire for an Oklahoma history book that more accurately reflected and wove together the diverse peoples who came, settled, built, and lived here. In fact, his central thesis of Oklahoma history and what he hoped my book, which as you know has become books, would reveal was the challenge as well as the opportunity and potential for a state with many more types of folks involved in building it than perhaps most of us have realized, and definitely than previous state history books have covered. It's February as we record this episode of Oklahoma Gold, the annual Black History Month. While African American history in this state was not excluded in our history books, going back at least to the World War II era, it was vastly underreported until recent years. Black pioneers, lawmen, outlaws, statehood-era legislators, aviators, victims of bigotry, Jim Crow laws, even lynching, the Tulsa, whatever you call it, race massacre, riot, or war of 1921, African-American military heroes, athletic and entertainment stars, civil rights luminaries, political and judicial leaders, and commercial trailblazers. All were scarcely mentioned in previous Oklahoma history books, if at all. And I know that one of your joys and mine on Oklahoma Gold is to tell the little-known, forgotten, and unknown stories of men and women who for a long time were overlooked by our regular histories. And as you know, we don't pick stories on here according to a numerical formula or quota system. We don't choose a person because they're black or white, male or female, liberal or conservative, or not. We lift up Oklahomans who deserve to be recognized and whom we usually revere and want to extol as exemplars for the rest of us to follow, or at least learn from. And if it's not the person or persons, it's the story of which they're a part. And proving our beloved Dr. Bob's original point, that comes very naturally if we know our material, because all sorts of folks have carved their names into the history and hopefully the memory of this state. And so this episode stands on its own merit, not only because of Black History Month, but because it constitutes a remarkable chapter in Oklahoma history, and likely a unique chapter in American history. But I think it holds particular significance for the month we're in because it illustrates, with one memorable sweep of events, played out by a host of powerful, real-life, even larger-than-life characters who actually walked among us, giants who walked the land not so long ago, in somewhat of a microcosm, if you will, a range of the challenges and opportunities, both that Oklahoma's African-American community have so well faced up to and encountered. In real history, though, no person nor community lives in a vacuum. And to all my friends out there, whether listening by radio, online, or podcast, what follows is a story for all of us, a story which I believe will make all Oklahomans who know of it proud. For it's a game we're talking about this time around, Gwin. A game like none other in Oklahoma, or perhaps American high school football history. The colored team from the wrong side of the tracks versus the cracker team from the wrong side of the river. One team's school was named for famed African-American abolitionist Frederick Douglass. The other team's players had attended grade schools and junior highs named for Confederate legends like Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson. Neither team's players felt safe venturing into the other's section of race-segregated Oklahoma City. The black team had not lost a game in 5 years and had thrashed rivals from 3 states by scores like 47-0, 61-18, 65-0, and 67-0. And as many of our listeners know, scores in the 60s in that generation would be comparable to triple-digit scores now. The white team, meanwhile, had won 7 straight conference titles and a half dozen large school state championships. Never before had a Negro high school football team, as they would have been called then, slugged it out against a white one in a school game in any class of play in segregated Oklahoma. The game was not even sanctioned by the Oklahoma Secondary Schools Athletic Association, the OSSAA. But that made no difference to the iconic head coaches, Moses Pie Miller of all-black Douglass and C.B. Spiegel of all-white Capitol Hill. Good friends for years, they had scrimmaged their teams all along in preseason play. Injuries and even hospital trips were not uncommon in these violent set-twos. Miller and Spiegel set up the historic regular season clash themselves. What about school administrators and civic leaders in still segregated Oklahoma City? They didn't even know about it, Spiegel said. The gridiron was far from the only venue where blacks and whites lived forcibly separated lives back then. Jim Crow-era segregation laws dating back to Oklahoma's 1907 statehood still prohibited what was called race mixing across society. African Americans were restricted to buying homes in their own neighborhoods. They could purchase clothing from white-owned stores, but not try on those clothes beforehand. Many white-owned restaurants prohibited blacks coming in to dine. Some allowed them to, quote, pick up their food to go in the alley, end quote, as black Oklahoma historian Bruce Fisher recalled from his childhood days. Clara Luper and other civil rights champions had not yet won African Americans the right to sit at lunch counters in OKC drugstores and department stores. Meanwhile, white business owners faced economic boycotts, social ostracizing, and possible misdemeanor legal charges if they served black customers. And white ministers could be, and sometimes were, fired for standing up for African American constitutional rights. Well, the general public apparently held no such qualms as their leaders or laws about the Douglas Trojans and Capitol Hill Redskins facing off on the football field on a chilly fall evening in the 1950s. They bought all the tickets that Capitol Hill, the host school, would sell, over 10,000 of them, including for thousands of rented portable bleacher seats. Those who didn't get tickets watched on live television or listened on one of the 2 radio stations covering the game. And what a game it was. Future college stars littered the field. Some of OU and OSU's greatest players of the 1950s wore the Redskins maroon and white or the Trojans black and orange. Douglas's Prentice Gott, easily the outstanding performer on the field, according to Daily Oklahoman sports writer Bob Dellinger, would become the first black football player for the Oklahoma Sooners, an all-conference star and a longtime NFL player. OU's Prentice Gott Academic Center would be named for the scholar. And we will pick up when we come back from our break on just what happened in that memorable game.
The Trojans versus the Redskins, the high school game of the century on Oklahoma Gold. John J. Dwyer, tell me the golden nugget.
Well, Gwin, we've been talking about the high school game of the century. Back in 1955, Capitol Hill Redskins, all-white team, Douglas Trojans, all-black team in segregated Oklahoma. And the great Prentice Gott lining up on one side for the Douglas Trojans. And if you haven't heard it, I urge you to listen to the Oklahoma Gold episode that tells the stirring life story of Prentice Gott. But he wasn't the only star on the field that night. Douglas fullback Wallace Johnson became the second black OU gridder behind Gott, as well as a Vietnam War officer, lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, and a professor at George Mason University. Meanwhile, 6'3" Dick Sorgel of Capitol Hill would quarterback Oklahoma A&M, now Oklahoma State, for 3 years, star on the Cowboys basketball team, and pitched their baseball team to the 1959 National Championship. Capitol Hill end, meanwhile, Jim Dobson starred with Sorgel on those OSU football and baseball teams, and Dobson's bat hit Oklahoma A&M to the national title. But on Friday night, November 3rd, 1955, they were all teenagers playing for many kinds of pride. Douglass quarterback and future college quarterback and future Oklahoma Secretary of Commerce and broadcasting magnate Russell Perry remembered, "We wanted to beat the white guys. We felt like we had to win. It was the biggest game of my life." Meanwhile, Capitol Hill quarterback Sorgel said, "We probably had a fear of black people." He had never spoken to an African-American person, and he didn't during the game. He recalled the hostility he felt from blacks at a Dallas area YMCA where he'd played a few basketball games when younger. A titanic struggle with some of the sternest line-pounding seen on the Oklahoma gridiron all year. That's how the Oklahoma newspaper's Bob Dellinger wrote as the two teams battled their way to a 6-6 halftime draw. Prentice Gott had thundered for 110 yards rushing and a touchdown. At halftime, though, Coach Spiegel of Capitol Hill adjusted the Redskin defense. "It was the only time I ever changed defenses at halftime," he recalled later in reflecting on his 40-year career. Well, the overhaul worked. Gott gained only 37 yards in the second half. Capitol Hill, though, lost 4 fumbles in the bruising battle. But Douglass, whom numerous Redskin players accused of biting them during the contest, sustained numerous penalties, as they had in their previous games against all-black teams. So the thrilling contest rumbled down to the final 30 seconds. Can you imagine 10,000 people on their feet screaming, 2 radio stations carrying it, and local TV in Oklahoma City? Still tied 6-6. Amidst the deafening roar of the 10,000-strong crowd, Sorgel and Capitol Hill lined up over the ball with a 4th down and goal on the Trojan 1-yard line. Redskin fullback Bobby Jobe was himself soon headed to OU as Gott's teammate, and he barreled into the end zone with 27 seconds remaining to give his team a 13-6 lead after the extra point kick. Remarkably, even that didn't settle the contest. Douglass had one more chance. In his offensive huddle, quarterback Perry called a long bomb to star pass catcher Ellsworth Hardiman. Coach Miller had ordered the play. Hardiman, though, surprised his teammates by voicing a rare protest on the iron-willed Miller's team. "Sorgel will be waiting back there, and he's too tall," the fleet receiver urged. "Throw it to me on a medium route across the middle. I'll get open, and I'll get it into the end zone." Perry stuck with his legendary coach's play call. He took the snap and dropped back to throw. Leaping into the air, his trademark throwing style, Perry hurled a dramatic jump pass that went over 50 yards through the air into the end zone toward Hardiman as time ran out. The lanky Sorgel and future OSU star intercepted it in the end zone. The quarterback himself finished the game with nearly 170 yards total offense. From start to finish, it was a toe-to-toe battle of 2 mighty defensive lines, Dellinger wrote in the Oklahoman, keyed to a fervor which was matched by the constant uproar of the overflow crowd. It was a memorable launch to integrated high school football in Oklahoma. Hardiman told me, Gwin, that the game officials encouraged players from both teams during the game and gave them playing tips. Though there were no fights or unsportsmanlike eruptions, the clash was savage. Injuries sustained from it ruined both teams for the year. Some Douglass fans claim that poor officiating by the white officiating crew contributed to their team's defeat. Trojan players who participated in the game told me they believed the officiating was fair. "The more time goes by, the prouder I am to have played in that game," Sorgel told the Oklahoman newspaper in 1999. Perhaps in a small way that opened some doors that needed to be opened. Gwin, you might say, we've got a whole sack full of golden nuggets tonight. 2/3 of a century later, Douglass's football stadium is named for Coach Miller. Capitol Hills is named for Coach Spiegel, whose decorated tenure there stretched 40 years. Gott and Sorgel later became good friends. Perry served as Oklahoma Secretary of Commerce in the Frank Keating gubernatorial administration. He built Perry Publishing and Broadcasting Company, the largest independent broadcaster in the state. The year after the game, Douglass entered the ranks of OSSAA high school competition. Perry led them to the large school state championship in their first campaign. Capitol Hill won the state title the following 2 seasons.
Now that's Oklahoma gold.